Are we being unknowingly programmed to create a world of war and don't even know it? The answer to this, along with how we can create a world we will all love to live in, are coming right up. Quantum physics reveals that what we are paying most of our attention to, the predominant thoughts, the predominant focus that we have, along with the corresponding emotions, are creating the future experiences and life events that we are going to be living into. It would seem that our minds are basically projectors, and that what we're seeing in our mind's eye is then being projected out into our outer world. We don't oftentimes experience exact replications of what we're seeing exactly, but the emotions that we have in response to what we're seeing up here, what we're observing, the kinds of thoughts that we're thinking, the things that become manifest tend to elicit exact replication of the emotions that we were feeling in response to what has been going on up here. Let's take a look at what this means in our outer world and in our own individual lives. Be sure to stay with me until the end because I have a few powerful tips on how to create a life you'll love living, and a special bonus tip on how you can create more powerfully in the world. So what do we do with the notion that our minds are creating our world and that we're doing most of it by default? We have the ability at any time to pay attention to our thoughts, what we're focusing on, what we're paying attention to, and our corresponding emotions. And we have the ability to change what's going on up here and therefore in here anytime we set our mind to it. But what happens when this is being chosen for us? What do I mean by that? If we stop to consider what's being presented to us predominantly through mainstream media, whether it be TV, movies, video games, magazines, whatever else, most of it's negative and a lot of it is downright violent. Even programs, and I invite you to consider the word programs, because that's what they're doing. Programs that aren't considered violent are still really negative a lot of the time. Even programs that aren't violent are most often laden with some kind of negativity or another predominantly. But that's just life, we might say. It's realistic, isn't it? Isn't it just reflecting what a lot of us experience or things we might realistically experience coming up later ahead? That's just life, right? Or is it that our minds are being trained into what we see up here, therefore creating what is now being projected by these powerful creation machines, meaning our minds, into the outer experience of what is being created out there? Things that we, in essence, might very soon be experiencing out in the world and in our daily lives. Quantum physics is revealing that we're creating that which we are paying a good portion of our attention to. And if that's true, then we aren't so much depicting the truth when we tell our stories of the things that have happened to us that we really don't like, that we wish we didn't live, and that we certainly hope we won't live some more of. And it isn't necessarily so true that it's just a reality of life as we get shown these types of things impressed upon us with the visuals, the audio, the things that are being said, the impact that it has on us as we're watching these things on a screen before us, regardless of if it's TV or movies or magazines or video games or what have you. So much so as it is creating more of it in our future in one way or another. What do we mean by that? We'll take a deeper look at it up ahead. We keep thinking all of this is the truth. The things that we talk about, the negative things that we allow ourselves to be impacted by, programmed by, if you will, right? We keep thinking that's all true, but according to quantum physics, we keep creating what we're paying attention to. And the more we keep looking at things from the past, saying that it's the truth, we're being impressed by more of that again. And whatever is going on up here now is the only point of power of creation that we have. And whatever is going on up here now is creating tomorrow, next week, next year. The things we've lived already don't have to continue to be the truth. They don't have to be more in our future reality. But by continuing to look back at them, we're continuing to put them out ahead of us further in the future. By continuing to engage in things that we would have never even dreamed of, when we allow ourselves to be impressed upon by what we're viewing, by what we're allowing other people to dictate to us, to put into these creation machines of ours, that now has the potentiality of being projected into our future. The news, which has been shown more and more and more to be laden with falsities, is filled with tons of negativity. And again, we might say, well, these things are happening to people. But even if they are happening for real and we aren't being lied to, there's evidence we've been being lied to through the news quite a bit. How extensive does it go? Not sure. Have you seen the movie Wag the Dog? I recommend it, and consider that maybe we're being shown a truth that's going on. And then let's consider how extensive does that even really go beyond what they're really portraying in just that movie. And I don't invite you to check that out so that you can become scared by it and wallow in it and then create negatively from there. But to set yourself free, because if you're the type of person that is bound by, addicted to, as I've known some people to be, what's going on in the world, the news isn't necessarily your place. And even if they are telling the truth about what has happened, do you want that to continue to be more of what does happen? We need to turn our attention away from that which we do not like. We need to stop talking about things that have happened that we do not like. We need to start putting our attention and talk about things that we want to create in the future, not talking about it from a way of like, I want it, like as if it doesn't exist because then it continues to stay out, but in a happy as if it is already kind of a way. That is the way that these minds are supposed to be used. Not by mulling around, rehashing what's happened, just regurgitating more and more and more of it out into the future, but utilizing it to harness images and thoughts and ideas and of beauty and of wonderfulness and corresponding emotions to then create that out into the world. But getting back to the news for just one moment, if you're someone who likes to watch it, I invite you to take notice of your emotional responses in relation to what you're being shown and told. Notice how it's making you feel. It isn't good most of the time. And these emotions that you're feeling, they're creating in your life. You may not get an experience that matches exactly a story that you've seen on the news. But if you saw a story that made you feel fearful, made you feel trepidation, made you feel worried about something that could happen, you could be in progress of creating for yourself an experience that will make you feel those things. It may not play out the exact way as the story you saw on the news, but something in your life could take place that will draw from you the emotions that you emitted in response to what you saw on the news. And it's not just the news. It's anything. I used to watch a soap opera. I'll go into that in more detail in another video, but I watched it on and off through the duration of my life. And what I started to notice was that I didn't notice it right away, and I sure as heck didn't have anybody tell me this the way that I'm telling you this, in this whole video here. I had no one telling me this in this way to where I could then look at it. It's just, I figured it out over a series of rounds of when I would watch this show. Things would start to go bad in my life. And when I wasn't watching it, things were always better. And by about 6 or 7 rounds of this, because when I would watch it, it could go on for months, mind you, and when I wouldn't watch it, it could go on for months, and I mean a lot of them. So years went by in order for me to go through like 7 or 8 rounds, but By the time I got to maybe 6, I started noticing, hey, you know, when I'm watching this, seems like things go a little bit worse. Like maybe I was making more money before when I wasn't watching it. Maybe as I've been watching it for the last few weeks, like, you know, it starts out okay. It's not like it hits immediately usually. But then like my money starts going down and maybe people start annoying me more. Like things just aren't going as good. I started noticing this. But what I also started to notice was once I started to realize this correlation, but I kind of watched it anyway a couple more rounds, things were actually getting worse beyond just my money going down. I'm not going to get into it further than that here. But when it comes to the news, even when we do see a story that's terrible, that something has happened to somebody or the family of somebody, that something bad happened to, and maybe it's true, maybe it really happened, we need to stop to consider that at least at this point in the world with how it's going, these things are happening to a very, very, maybe like 1%, maybe less than 1%. And everybody else is not experiencing things that badly. But if we continue to tune in, if we continue to tune in to programming like this, having these impressions of being victimized, of having really bad things happen, and feeling the emotional responses, the percentages of how many people this is happening to might go up. It probably already has been. If you consider statistics over like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, seems like maybe those numbers are maybe going up in terms of percentages of people. And we have to consider that as we pay more and more and more attention, that we're in relation to this stuff that's being shown to us on a screen, and then having an emotional response. Attention is being given to that, and quantum physics proves where attention goes, energy flows. When we have thoughts and we speak, molecules move. This is proven in brain science. But we have been giving our attention over unknowingly. We haven't realized it. We've mostly thought it was entertainment. But we're allowing our experiences to be shaped by this. And you might be wondering at this point, well, hey, this title of this video said, are we being programmed for war? And like, well, where does that fit into all this? And I'm getting there. I'm just setting up a little bit of a foundation so that when I get there, you can understand it more completely. Otherwise, it might not seem understandable if I didn't preface it a little first. Because, my friends, this is huge. And with understanding, with just a little bit of understanding, any of us can shape not only our individual life experience, but we can impact the world at large experience, adding into the creation of a joyful life experience in a joyful world we would all love to live in. And if that sounds good to you, stay here, keep watching with me. You will be happy, you will find value in what I share with you next. What are most video games about? Blowing things up, shooting things down, blowing up the bad guy, eliminating the bad guy. They're making up a bad guy that doesn't even really exist, but as the video games are being played and the concept of a bad guy existing, arising, emerging, being shot down, our mind is in the process of projecting a possible reality where bad guys emerge, bad guys exist. They have to be shot down. It's a war-type situation. Me against the enemy. There's a perceived enemy. And as people who are addicted to these games are so sucked in them and they play them over and over and over again, they're practicing the art of war, of enemies, of shooting them down over and over and over again. And even many of the TV shows these days have a lot more blood and gore and violence. And as people are watching more and more and more of that, not only are their minds projecting that imagery, but the people themselves are also becoming more and more numbed to even seeing that kind of thing. 20 or 30 years ago, if people would have saw that type of stuff out in the world, they would have been appalled by it. But because of being subjected to this imagery so much over the last years, people are more numb to it when they do see it out in the reality, out in the outer world. In the way that they respond, it's almost like it's becoming more commonplace. This is concerning because as people are subjecting themselves, subjecting their minds, their imagery, their thought processes, their focus on violence, gruesomeness, gore, war, beatings, having to beat one out over the other, this kind of thing, the negativity, the higher our chances are that we're creating more and more and more of it. And the world is, it really looks to me like it is doing this already. It has been growing more and more and more over time. And think about the evolution of TV shows and how that's expanded and gotten more violent over the past few decades. And now look at the world out there and what's going on. And I don't just mean on a political level, although that is definitely entwined, but look at it in neighborhoods, among people in the workspaces. I have to beat you out for the promotion. There's not enough to go around. I have to beat this kid out at school. I have to be the king. I have to beat that guy out on the street. I have to be the king. It's a you or me world instead of a you and me world, and yet any given one of us will say we want a world of peace. Nobody wants a world of violence. Nobody wants a world of conflict. Everyone seems to want a world of peace, but what we're not recognizing is the way that we're viewing things, and this has largely been imparted to us by the programming just down to us through mainstream media. And it's fascinating to me. There are a few courses out there, I've taken a few myself, that have been so transformative, that have made such a difference to me in how I've lived my life in a positive way. And yet when I would try to tell people I cared about, because don't you do that? When something really makes a good difference for you, you want to tell people about it because you want them to get that difference too. But certain things you only get by experience, and there's no way to transfer that experience verbally. So there's no amount of talking about it you can do to give the person enough of an experience for them to choose whether they should maybe go do that course or not themselves. But as they're seeing you in your excitedness and happiness, and as there's no way you can relay enough of an experience to them, which they can't really understand because we're used to gabbing about everything, usually crap, if you really stop to think about it, and we all can kind of muster up some past remembrance of crap. And so even if we're not getting it the way that they're explaining it, we think we are because we have a past reference that comes up. But when we're talking about a transformational type of experience where we know we've broken through stuff, we know we've broken through limits that have been holding us back, that have been keeping down our life experience, and we want to share that with the people that we care about, do you know that more often than not, they actually get worried that maybe I'm under some mind control? Not just me, but anyone who's had this experience. I've seen it over and over. Well, are you sure that they didn't brainwash you? Are you sure that you're not under mind control? Are you sure it's not a cult? I'm sorry, but you know what? Cults make one person powerful. A transformational course makes everybody who went to it powerful. A cult centers around a religious type of theme that empowers that one person. A course that breaks you through crap that you had, probably from your upbringing somewhere that's been holding you back, does not empower the person who was leading the course. It empowers you and everybody else who was in the course. And it's not ever centered around a religious theme. It's centered around helping you break free of stuff that was holding you back. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It's independent of any of that. And yet they're so concerned and wary. Well, you're like really super happy, like, and it just seems like you're just so bubbly, like what's wrong? We've been trained, we want happiness, but when someone actually goes through something that actually breaks them out of the freaking muck, and catapults them into a happier, uplifted space that we're all saying that we want, we meet it with hesitation and fear, and we'll run right back to those video games and those TVs where programming and brainwashing is the theme of the day. And let me tell you, most of it isn't helping our lives. And most of it isn't helping what's going on out there in the world. And what I'm talking about here goes far beyond what many of us have already heard of in recent years about the type of mental manipulations that advertisers have learned to do. And there's a variety of tactics that they use. This goes so far beyond that. What I'm talking about here is the actual shows, the actual games, the actual movies, and the impact that they're having in creating in our individual life experience and our world experience collectively as a whole. Consider how many kids are out there playing these type of video games hours a day. Not even just kids, some adults too. Consider how many shows are about violence and killing and outdoing and war, even if it's on a domestic type of level. We're still tuning into that energy of that. We're still having emotional responses in relation to what we're seeing, what our minds are being focused upon through the attention of what we're seeing and hearing. And then that serves to create in our lives, my life, if I'm watching, your life, if you're watching. And I know you might not, at this point, want to really hear anymore, right? Because you might be thinking, well, but I love that show. Like, I'm just so addicted to that show. Okay, go watch it. I'm not even saying to stop right now, but just start paying attention. Start paying attention to how it makes you feel, and start paying attention to what you're seeing and how you're feeling. And just contemplate that. I'm not saying you have to even really think too much into it. Just observe it. Just notice it. That's what I did. And I can tell you that when I noticed enough, I naturally just put it down. When I was ready, I naturally became more and more aware of my emotional responses and to what I was seeing, and I came to the point where I was ready to put it down. Let's take a look at the idea of almost everybody being negatively impacted, probably on a daily basis, by one form of media or another. Whether they're watching TV shows or playing video games, watching movies, or what have you. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's so overwhelming. What can I possibly do? Even if I work on this within myself, what can I do against all of that? Well, my friends, here's the good news. And this is like the most important thing I can give to you at this point in time, is that one person who is conscientiously in control of what they're thinking, at least a lot of the time, meaning if they catch themselves in negativity tangents, they bring themselves back to a positive place of some kind or another. Therefore, their emotions are switching around, becoming more positive again. One person who is consciously creating has more powerful impact within the world at large, in addition to their own life, than over 1 million people who are by default creating, because they have no point of focus. They're just creating at whim. Whatever is being presented to them, whatever they're seeing, they're seeing all over the place and emoting. Their emotions are radiating in response. Whatever they're seeing on TV, whatever they're hearing from their friend or their family or this person or that person, whatever they see out there. And it's a mash of stuff. And one person who's purposely focused on positivity, envision a world of unity, envision a world of people together, of it working well for everyone. Envision it however it looks to you. Envision it as if it's already that. Don't ever think about how it got that way. Oh, well, this has to get done first, and that's it. No, don't. It's already there. It's already there. Hold it, feel a joyful response, an appreciative response, you do that, you have more power in creation in this world than over 1 million people running around scattered. And there are some people who are already doing this. You'll be joining them. You're not the first. I'm not the first, you're not the second. It only takes a handful of people, positively, conscientiously focused. And where you'll start to see the differences first are in your own life, because your life will go better first. Opportunities that are wonderful, that will delight you, will come to you first. Nothing is more important than that you feel good, and that will benefit the world, but first it will benefit you. The only way to create a world at large that's a world of beauty, a world of joy for everyone, the world of peace that we all want to have, is to reprogram our minds. We have to stop allowing our minds to be programmed in muck and negativity for us. And we have to learn to stop allowing our own thought tangents to run of their own accord into muck and negativity. Because studies that were done recently have shown that 90% of people's thinking time is spent in negativity. That's just default thinking, people. When our minds go to default thinking, they tend to run in negativity. And the only reason that that happens is because pathways have been formed based on the repetition of negative thinking. When we stop and refocus our mind repeatedly, enough times over enough days, those pathways begin to shift. They break, new pathways are made, and eventually, if our thoughts get away from us then, they will land into more positive spaces. And as we pay attention to that and focus on that and focus again and again and again on things that delight us and positive thought lines, then the new default thoughts land in better and better and better spaces. This is where our point of power lies. And our moment of power is now. Any given point in now, because that is where life is actually occurring. Tomorrow is created now. Next week is created now. Next month is created now. What is happening up here and in here now? That is your point of power. If you'd like to learn more about this and techniques that you can use to shift your life and the world, subscribe to this channel and click the bell so that you catch every one of our videos. They all will work together and they'll all reveal more depth gradually so that you can utilize it easily and simply and make your life more beautiful and help to shift that of the world experience that we're all living in.